Did you know that in New Jersey, the state vegetable is a tomato, but in Ohio, the state fruit is a tomato? How can that be? Legally, tomatoes are a vegetable, and botanically, tomatoes are a fruit. That happened in a 1987 case heard by the Supreme Court in Nix versus Hedden, where there was a duty to be assessed on all vegetables. And the courts determined that tomatoes, well, they had to decide if tomatoes were a fruit or a vegetable. And they decided that legally they are a vegetable because you will have tomatoes as dinner and not as dessert. That's an interesting fact. Today we're doing 10 tips for growing vibrant tomatoes. And this is Christy with Little Roots Ranch. Stay tuned. So here are 10 tips to help you grow vibrant tomatoes. Tip number 1 is sun. You're going to want to choose a sunny location with at least 7 hours of sun. Pick the warmest spot in your garden. Tip number 2 is going to be soil. You're going to want a rich, well-draining soil that's slightly acidic. If you don't know if your soil is acidic or not, you can always get a test from your local extension office. And if you're finding your soil is too acidic, you want to add some lime. And if it's too alkaline, you could add some sulfur or some compost. Tip number 3 is timing. Tomatoes love warmth, and some places have warmth and sun, and some places have that more than others. The key to getting your tomatoes ready is to start them as early as you can, but not too early. So that might look like, for me, for instance, in the Pacific Northwest, I start my tomatoes under a grow light in the nice warm comfort of my home. That way, when the temperature that's outside, which is on average 60 degrees or above, then my tomatoes are ready to go, as opposed to just starting them because I won't get very much fruit by the end of the season. And tip number 4 is to plant deeply. Tomatoes are stronger, any plant, but especially tomatoes are stronger with really robust roots. And tomatoes are one of those plants where the roots grow along the stem. So what does that mean? What do you mean plant deeply? There's 2 ways you can do that. 1, dig a deeper hole, or when you pot up, to put the tomato plant deeper in the container or soil or whatever you're working with. The other option is to lay it sideways. I know that sounds crazy, but you can take the whole plant and just lay it sideways and cover up a portion of the stem, and the other portion will just grow straight up. And it's not like it'll keep going. I mean, you'll have to stake it and train it a little bit, but interesting. Let's see, I already got that one. And then tip number 5 is going to be interplanting. What is interplanting? Where you plant things together, obviously. But some of the best companions for tomatoes are also some of the best companions in the kitchen, which is basil, my personal favorite, basil, onions, garlic, whatever. These items, when grown with tomatoes, help to repel pests and especially nematodes. So something to consider. Oops. And then tip number 6 is water, water, water. Not overwatering, but that water is important. You're going to want to shoot for about 1 inch of water a week. Of course, that depends on how your soil is and how your climate is, of course. But you can also add mulch to retain water, especially if you're in a really hot area. The key to watering tomatoes is consistency, especially once you have fruit. If your tomatoes have been lacking water and they're dehydrating a little bit, and you give them a ton of water, or you get a massive rain, they're going to split. So you want to be careful about that. Nobody likes to come out and see their tomatoes just busted after all the hard work they put into them. And some people collect them before rains. I keep mine pretty watered evenly, and so I don't have too much of a problem with it, but it does happen. Tip number 7 is going to be pruning suckers. So the reason we want to prune suckers is because we want the plant to focus on tomatoes. That's why we're growing tomatoes, right? I mean, you can grow foliage or whatnot, but you want those yummy, juicy, homegrown, fresh off the vine tomatoes. And the way to get that is by pruning the suckers. Those things take a whole lot of energy and just take it away from the plant's ability to grow taller. They grow wider, but grow taller and produce more tomatoes. Another reason, if you saw my other video, you can grow free tomato plants that you can keep for yourself or gift to your friends. Make sure that you make clean cuts with a sterilized scissors, or if they're really small, your fingers, as you don't want to introduce, of course, anything when you're cutting them off. And another great reason is to increase air circulation, because as we know, tomatoes are pesky with moisture. All right, tip number 8 is to stake or cage. So the one key thing is to stake early. What's important about that is because sometimes you blink and your tomato plants are out of control, and putting them, especially if they're already planted, trying to put the cage around them is going to break them or you'll have a lot of problem. Do it early and they have a nice home to grow into. Also, it should be noted, there are 2 different types of tomatoes, determinate and indeterminate. And if you're not familiar with these, I would definitely suggest doing a little bit more research and also knowing what kind of tomatoes you have, or you can have both, as I do. Determinate have a determined height, usually about 3 or so feet. And so what they do is they set all their fruit at once. They get to size, they flower, they produce, they're done. Indeterminate is exactly what it sounds like. They can grow forever, 200 feet tall. No, I'm kidding. Usually anywhere from 9 to 11, or depending on, your growing ability and stuff like that. And they continue to produce fruit, not all at once, but slowly as it ripens throughout the whole season. And so that's something to be aware of. You're definitely gonna need to stake those indeterminates. Also, they can be trailing. So if you don't get them vertical, they'll just keep growing horizontal and root. And then of course the bugs will crawl over your beautiful tomatoes and they'll probably beat you to eating them, which is not fun. Tip number 9 is to prune is that in there? Yeah, prune the lower branches. At about 3 feet, I like to prune, actually kind of lower. I'm a pretty aggressive pruner, but a safety number is that when your plant is 3 feet tall, to prune off the bottom foot. I like to do the bottom 2 feet. Obviously not when my plant's less than 2 feet tall, but pretty much all of I kind of just prune as I go. I just, every time it gets a little taller, I just take off one of those bottom things. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, when you have a mature plant, those branches at the bottom, they get the least amount of sun, and it's also where the air tends to, it needs more circulation in order to keep the plant healthy. Also, I've mentioned before, but when you're watering or when it's raining, there are pathogens that are bouncing off that soil, the soil-borne pathogens, and hopping right onto those leaves. If those leaves aren't there, then they're not going to be able to hop on and catch a free ride. So that's definitely what I like. And of course, I said increases the airflow. Step number 10, and this one's an interesting one because either you've heard of it and it's normal, or you haven't heard of it and you're like, what the heck is that for? Eggshells. So eggshells, they release calcium, which is what your plant needs to prevent what's called blossom end rot. You'll know if you have it because your fruits will have black bottoms, and there's nothing worse than finding that. I luckily haven't had any blossom end rot in any of my tomatoes, but I know it can happen easily. The thing about eggshells is that they don't just turn into calcium like that. So what I like to do is I keep a little compost bit, well, I guess it's more of a plastic tray, and just all year I toss my eggshells in there, and then come springtime with the tomatoes, each time I pot up or whatever I'm doing, I always put some of those broken down eggshells. I put a couple coffee grinds in there as well to kind of keep it. But that way, some of the eggshells are brand new, but a lot of them have been breaking down for over a year or so. So this is Christy with Little Roots Ranch, and I hope that you enjoyed 10 tips to growing vibrant tomatoes. And if you have any questions, comments, concerns, anything, go ahead and message me or put comments below and I can get back to you. I appreciate you taking the time to watch. Please like and subscribe, and I hope you have a great day. Bye.